Hi, everybody, and welcome to our panel. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. So the phasing out of the cultural state of emergency, strategies for music policymakers, part 2. Our first iteration of this panel was part of ESNS this year in February, and we're hoping that we might have a third iteration later on in the year as we move through the challenges of the pandemic as a sector. So I'm just going to briefly introduce myself and the panel, and then we're going to move to the discussion. There's plenty of opportunities for you to feed into the discussion through the chat, and I'll do my best to feed in your questions as we go along. And I'll try and leave some time at the end of the panel session as well, so that we can hear more questions from you. We only have 45 minutes, so I'll keep time as well. So I'm Deborah King. I'm the director of Brighter Sound, and it's a national music organisation based in Manchester, and we work nationally and internationally. Brighter Sound is the sector lead for the Manchester Music City initiative, and we're a member of the International Music Cities Network. And so I'm representing the network today as panel host. It's a network of international music cities. It's collaboration based, and it has a focus on artists and business and city development. And there's a Music Cities Network website, which is very easy to find if you want to have more of a look. So I'm very excited to introduce our wonderful panel members today, who have a sort of vast experiences from across the music sector and from different parts of the world. So I'm going to briefly introduce the panel members, and please refer to their bios online for further information. And if people can smile as I introduce them, that would be really helpful. So thanks very much for coming today, everybody. And first of all, I was going to introduce Helen Sildner, who's the founder of Thailand Music Week. Thank you. And hi. And Enric Palau, who's the co-director of Advanced Music and the Sona Festival. Hi, Enric. Hi, nice to see you. And Jesper Mardell, who's the managing director of Promus and the organizer of the Spot Festival, and also the co-founder of the Music Cities Network. Hi, Jesper. And then finally, Lex Davidson, who's the strategy advisor for live music and performance for the city of Sydney, all the way over from Australia. And it's a different time of day altogether, I think, in the evening over there. So welcome to you all, and thanks so much for joining us today. As we all know, the pandemic has had a decimated impact on the music sector worldwide, in particular on our live music scene and ecosystem. And I think it's also exposed the vulnerability of our sector and the fragility of the sector's employment practice with musicians and independents who are all suffering financially. And I think it's really highlighted the need for the sector to be super adaptable and flexible in this really changing and unknown kind of environment as we're going through the pandemic. So obviously today we've got really different perspectives on the panel from all over the world, from Eastern and Western Europe, as well from the other side of the world in Australia. So within this context, I just wanted to ask the panel really what you feel the challenges are currently that you're facing now, and how you're dealing with them. And Helen, if I could come to you first, that would be great.
Yes, thank you. And hello from Estonia and Tallinn. I think we share many of the challenges. Just briefly, what our organization has gone through, we were one of the lucky ones who were able to pull off a physical festival also in 2020. We postponed once last year. So as we went into the current year, 21, we have already postponed twice. First from May to June, then from June to end of September. And we can all probably say that rescheduling is the name of the game. Replanning, doing a lot of work, not knowing if this will come to a fruition. I think we all very know this situation quite well. But I think the challenges are multi-layered in that sense as well. You know, there's societal challenges, professional challenges, individual challenges, and we all kind of go in between of those three layers. We need to see how we can keep our sectors afloat, our companies, our organizations functioning. We need to hold on to the teams and the talent that we have. Even if we have funds, we need to find motivation, people not to go over to other sectors, because you really need to innovate and think how to keep people motivated in the organization. We need to also stay relevant, essentially, to kind of find a way how to keep a dialogue with our audiences and with our essentially audiences in the cultural sector, that we wouldn't lose our audiences to Netflix forever in that sense, because we know that a year in a way is enough for people to start changing their habits already. So it's basically, I think, staying relevant to our teams, our creatives, our content makers, to our audiences. These are some of the issues, let alone the financial difficulties, how to basically stay alive. But also at the same time, probably we're all in our society struggling with mental health issues as well. I think this is one of the big issues as well, that we as music and culture sector need to kind of inspire people at the time when finding kind of mental resources for kind of finding a purpose or anything positive. I think this is our role to play at the moment. So it's kind of where to find strengths for yourself as an individual, for your organization and your company, but also to inspire the society. So maybe I will start with that. There's a huge list of things which can be done on all of those elements, but let's go into that later.
Thanks, Helen. I think that's really interesting, and the splitting up as well of the societal, professional, and individual. And of course, yeah, the additional thing about mental health, not just within the music sector, but for our audiences, which I think is also, and the kind of way we display and build on strengths, all really interesting. Enric, from the Sonar Festival perspective, does this resonate with you? Do some of the things that Helen was saying resonate too? Oh, I think I can't quite hear you. I don't know whether you can put your...
Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah, of course, everything Helena said resonates to me. Canceling, rescheduling, everything, going, our sector is really suffering. I think all of our companies have been through, reducing their teams, sending people at home, going for loans and public fundings, government fundings to keep some of the salaries alive. So it's in the personal level, it's a lot of suffering in our teams, in our sector, directly in the people in the team, but the whole sector of from this industry, from the PA and light supporters, everyone that is involved in the kind of events that we prepare, right? So we also learn a lot through this period. We experimented a great hybrid event in September last year. We are preparing for October. So we won an application on artificial intelligence and music by STARTS, a program on the European Community. So we are also experimenting and learning a lot in that field. That will be part of our event in October in Barcelona. It looks like we are doing Sonar Istanbul the first weekend in October, again this year. And challenges are big, and one of them is the youngest audience is just waiting for the moment to get out and go to the events and socialize and enjoy the live music again. The middle-aged people, there's some fear that we will have to make some work there, because as Helena said, it's too much time of people at home. Some people have developed a kind of fear of being with a big group of other people. So we will face this when will we reopen, right? So yes, Spain particularly suffering because we don't have the fundings that other countries have for our sector and for the society in general, and people losing their jobs. And nothing else I can say except that waiting that vaccination, which seems to be the direction that scientists and politicians have decided to go needs to speed up for us to be able to do our jobs again.
Yeah, thank you, Enrique. I mean, I think that whole thing about the nervousness and the nervousness on one hand and the excitement on the other from audiences is going to be really interesting to see how that pans out, and the kind of the economic disadvantage that it's placed so many of our citizens in. I think the pandemic and our audiences in, as well as people that work within the sector, is coming through really, really strongly. Yes, but just from your perspective, across Aarhus and Denmark, I mean, how's it going there, and what are the challenges that you're facing there, and how are you dealing with them?
Well, thank you. I mean, a little bit the same as has been pointed out before, but again, we are talking about both on a national and a city level. If we take the national level, a lot of similarities, as you have said, you guys, before. But I think one thing that really came into to the big discussion here was that the political system didn't have a clue about the music ecosystem at all. So that has been a discussion that really needed to be addressed, and that has taken quite a long time to give that information to the political establishment, that this is a very complicated, very huge music ecosystem, and it's not just about the people who are performing on the stage. It's as you said, Enrique, all the people behind the whole business structure, etc., etc. So there has been a struggle there. But even having said that, there was also this. I think the music business and the music environment itself has it challenges. It has to learn to work together, actually. I mean, the promoters, the agents had to organize themselves, which they have never been before, in order to be heard at all. So that was a huge part of the discussion. And again, also this discussion about working in a cultural sector and being regarded as a business was an issue that came on the table during this. So and that has been on the top level of the agenda. On a local perspective, I think what we have been doing here is maybe a little bit more agile, because we have this understanding on a political level for the music environment and also for the music business. I'm not saying that everything has been happy days here at all, but there was some measurements in the beginning addressing these challenges from the music communities, from the city, and the city in cooperation with some of the big private funds here in the city. So that was the first sort of reach out to the environment. We also started some initiatives to help people who were doing online sessions or backyard concerts, etc., at least so they could get a salary. So that is sort of where we are right now. And again, as has been said, on the uncertainty, the rescheduling, and not really knowing what is going on.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the political perspective and understanding is really interesting, because it's the same in the UK, actually. I think there's been so much lobbying that's come from, the experience of the pandemic to government about so many elements in the music sector that they just didn't get. And also that whole thing of collaborating and organizing together as well, is quite a key thing. So yeah, I can really see how that has, on the one hand, it's been really frustrating. On the other hand, you've got this sort of increased collaboration across cities. So yeah, I can see. Lex, I'd just be really interested to bring your perspective in, especially as things are very different in Australia. And you were saying earlier that actually, in terms of the pandemic, the numbers of people who are kind of experiencing COVID are just non-existent or very low at the moment. So.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's different, but it's also still so very much the same. We are in an incredibly fortunate situation that we've got the transmission of the virus very much under control. We currently have no transmission of the virus within the community. But we've been able to achieve that because we are this island in the Antipodes. We're able to shut down our borders. We've been able to keep people out, and with the people we keep out the virus. And we've done it through a series of lockdowns and restrictions on our venues and the way that we work. So we have a sector of venues that are incredibly under-resourced, that if they're not in debt, then they have no reserves left. And we have this long tail out of the pandemic, where, like you were saying, Helen, we're watching that that behavioural change. Over this period of time, people have lost contact with that regular experience of going out and attending venues. And there's also still a long time until I think people are going to really feel comfortable again. Even without the virus necessarily circulating around, there's still a sense of hesitancy amongst audiences. And a tendency to select to stay away from a situation that might be crowded. So even as we have venues that are getting back close to full capacity, you have an audience that's choosing not to be in situations where there is a full capacity. So we have to try and re-educate or make the audience comfortable again to come back into these spaces. We've seen this emptying out of the city centre as people are still not returning to work entirely. People have loved working from home and a new flexible approach to work, and it's changed the way that people are interacting with our inner city areas, which is also where our entertainment venues are. So we don't have that same sort of workforce spilling into the city each day to then spill into our venues. And the biggest thing, of course, for us is that we have absolutely no tourists. We've had no tourism for a year, and with a very delayed, protracted vaccination rollout, it looks like we're not going to have tourists until at least early next year at the earliest. So we have a whole sector who does not have the audience and the income streams that was previously available to it, while the rest of the country is expecting us to start to move on and pick up and get back to normal.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that resistance as well, and that nervousness, and also I think that's the same here. The sense of a city being empty because people are continuing to work from home. Of course, we haven't had that release yet of being able to work in offices, but that doesn't surprise me. That sort of lack of people coming in and through and then going to entertainment venues and what that actually means, and people really liking that independence and flexibility of working from home too. It kind of fits in really to the next question, which is really about, in terms of very specifically about, the process of opening up outdoor activity, clubs, venues, nighttime economy, in cities. How do we do that? And what are the best processes for doing that? And how can music policies that we start to kind of adapt really facilitate that, given, and especially that whole kind of period of transferring from zero capacity to reduced capacity to full capacity? Enric, I wonder if you had any thoughts on that, and how what your thinking is around SONA and plans and so on.
Well, in Spain we did that test, this rapid test for a show with 5,000 people just very recently, with a concert at Palau Sant Jordi. Successful. They will have the results of this. We supported that initiative, and we'll have the results of this next week. It's approved, and the next steps will be whether still using rapid test in the next following months, and then we are all waiting for regulations about capacities for the following. In our case, we don't do regularly like shows. We are not the kind of promoter that do shows in venues every week. So I'm not the best one to to explain about this, because we do large events. So we definitely, in the case of SONA, we put together 10,000-15,000 people in the indoors in the main stage at SONA by Night. So we knew that we would have to cancel again 21 because things were not looking good, and that's why we are now waiting for June 22nd. Regulations in June 22nd, nobody knows. Hopefully it's not only SONA, it's a lot of these kind of format festivals that we cannot do a festival with social distance. Basically, there's no, it doesn't work, right? So people standing, we need people standing and being close one to the other. And I mean, we will start slowly. I mean, Sona in Istanbul, it's in Zorlu, great venue, great team, still indoors, so it's probably going to be a mix of social distance and some regulations beginning of October. But it's still in Barcelona for the end of October. We are still investing on a hybrid event because we believe regulations are going to be still difficult. So that's why we are investing a lot of time in this kind of format where people can be, whether the regulations will allow us, can be enjoying and the content we are providing through the streaming. And the experience in last September was actually great. I mean, we have a combination of live shows inside, pre-recorded capsules from all kinds of different spaces, panels, talks. I mean, we had more people attending to a panel discussion than ever in our history as a hybrid, event. There's some good results out of this. I mean, we all want to get back to the full capacity live experience, but in the middle we are learning some good experiences too.
Yeah, it sounds, that's really interesting that you had more people attending than ever before for the panel events, and I guess that's because it's possible because it's all online, so it just opens it right up. And
yes, and because the kind of event we do, we run the full capacity event we do every year in Barcelona, it has like 4 or 5 music stages at the daytime, combined with exhibitions, panels, workshops. So there's so much to see, and then there's more than 100 artists performing during 3 days and 3 nights. There's so much to see that people sometimes they miss parts. And with the streaming, we built it like 2 channels, and one was like a TV going on, Sona TV, with shows and panels, and so people just jump into content that on a physical festival they would probably not jump, because they would be just standing in front of the main stage where the most popular artist is performing.
Yeah.
And actually we had very good attendance in some of the activities through the streaming, and very good reactions of people being super.
I think it might have gone actually. Definitely frozen. So I just lost that last bit, Enric, sorry.
Yeah, Jamal, sorry, my connection is maybe a bit slow.
Okay.
I'm just saying that through the streaming, we made able, for some kind of people to discover content that in the middle of the huge physical event they would have missed.
Yeah. It's just good to hear the positive sides of it as well, because we're all struggling, and I think the sector's going to have to be super adaptable, and it sounds as if there's an example of, a really good model of adapting across both areas, the digital and the live, and that's good to hear about. Jesper, from your perspective, how's it going in Aarhus in terms of venues and clubs and opening and numbers?
Well, everybody is as yesterday we had our restaurants and bars opened yesterday, obviously still with some restrictions, and we are hoping for venues to open up by the beginning of May, but again with some distance and limited amount of audience. For the festival, it's still very insecure. There was supposed to be an announcement yesterday from the government, but that has been postponed, which is not a good sign. Maybe it could be a good, I don't know. We will see. There are some plans for the summer. We have a rather big touring festival called the Green Concerts, which is an outdoor, obviously, a festival visiting 8 or 10 cities, but they're trying to downscale so they could have people in sectors like they are having on the football arenas right now, because that opened up yesterday as well. So there's a limited capacity, pre-testing, own facilities in sort of small cells around this festival area. So they're hoping to be able to implement that season for them. Otherwise, for Spot Festival and the conference, we were supposed to be, first we were supposed to be in the beginning of May, then we postponed to the end of June, and now we have postponed until the end of September. And we hope, I mean, again, if the vaccination plans and programs are still, even though there are some adjustments all the time, hopefully we should be able to go through that by the end of September. So that's sort of the current situation right now. But on top of that, we are planning for the activities for next year, whereas we are planning for a whole year in celebration of music. So that's kind of obviously a restart program. It is completely backed by the business community. It's backed by the political community and the musical community in the city. And we are working on that right now for the funding, for the program, etc. But it is a proof that everybody is keen on getting back to some kind of normal, what that will be post COVID-19. But I'm looking at it as a very positive sign that everybody has sort of acknowledged how much culture actually means for us. So on that level, we are really aiming at getting 22 back, or get the music back to the people in 22. So that's what we're working on right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of a very realistic time frame, isn't it? Hopefully. I mean, it feels more realistic.
We'll never know.
Than lots of things, but we never know. No. I'm just going to just go on to actually, Lex, I don't know whether you could just talk a little bit about other policies that you've been implementing in terms of the whole of the music ecosystem across Sydney, you know, in terms of, you know, just because we've just been talking about the fragile nature of the sector, not just in terms of the venues, but also how it's affected, you know, the supply chain and musicians and independents, and, you know, from the economics as well of music streaming and the high percentage of musicians. I think actually Helen was mentioning, you know, that have basically moved on to different careers. I think in the UK it's like 30% of musicians and independents who've moved to different careers. So it's really quite high. So just really wanted to just talk to you generally about the ecosystem and how Sydney's really building on that now that, you know, the rates have gone down.
Yeah, and look, it has been a challenge throughout all of this time of reduced activity and how to keep those people in work and engaged. We were able to, certainly through the City of Sydney and then through other government funding bodies, through the arts and the music funding bodies, encourage investment in the development of new work throughout this time. So we introduced at the city, we're one of the first to act at the City of Sydney with a fellowship program for artists to spend the lockdown creating new work. So we at least had some work happening with the artists and through them, the suppliers that they use. Of course, that doesn't necessarily help out the whole live music sector supply chain that we know is so broad and complex. We have luckily over summer, as things have eased off a little, been able to hold quite a number of outdoor events, and the city worked with the state government to fund a big stage on the square outside the cathedral in the centre of the city. And we had 2 months of 5 nights a week live music programming, very cheap ticket price, very incredibly COVID safe, heavily managed audience experience, but outdoors over summer, spread out. So that was able to start to engage a lot of those suppliers again, and we really made sure that all of the suppliers who were involved came from the local music industry, and we're able to throw a bit of money into those kind of recovery events. So in some ways, we've been able to kind of keep those connections alive. But of course, with all of that activity, the venues then still are struggling themselves, just the bricks and mortar paying the rent, managing to hold on to their staff, managing to hold on to their spaces. We've had some venues that we've lost. And I think really now in terms of in getting back to a full capacity operation, the approach we need to take now is to just dump more funding onto venues. And I think there's really an opportunity to use an investment at this time to shape the long-term growth and reshaping, if you like, of our industry in the ways that we've been talking for years that we'd like to see. How can we invest now in the diversity that we want to see, the inclusion? How do we invest in accessible spaces? How do we look at the boards and the management structures of these spaces? How do we create safe spaces that are inviting for the full range of our community? How do we empower women in those management models? How do we empower diverse voices, marginal communities, our First Nations, Aboriginal communities? How do we give them more of a space in the venues that we build out of this? The only way is going to be to heavily invest in this sector now in order to keep those doors open. So if we're going to be making that kind of financial investment, how can we make it go as far as it possibly can to achieve more than just keeping the lights on and keeping the venues there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really fascinating point. And I think that whole thing about an equal and fair industry and how, you know, this is an opportunity to effect change within the sector. And it's such an important opportunity, and it feels like a once in the lifetime moment where actually, you know, because everything's been thrown up into the air, there's this opportunity to make a difference. And that's that sort of thing about inclusion and accessible spaces and management and structures and difference. I think that's the exciting bit, I think, of what's happened, that there's potential for change, and it you know, it won't feel as the same as before. And
people have had a lot of time to reflect on the industry and whether it was really an industry that they were entirely proud of. And it is an opportunity, and people have been talking. We've got the sector connecting and talking so much more than they have before. So it's an opportunity to broaden those conversations.
Yeah, no, really exciting. Helen, do you want to add anything to that? Because I know you've been thinking about all of those things as well. So just,
yes, several things to reflect back to on what has been said, but moments of restart are always really unique, and we don't have them often. So it's actually when we go into this moment in history, back then we really have this moment at the grasp of our hands, that we can reimagine things. Something I wanted to reflect back to that Lex was saying earlier, the lack of tourists. It's actually quite interesting. You know, many of our country's economic patterns rely on tourism. And take the tourists away, see what happens in your countries and your cities. In the case of Tallinn, it was immediately very self-evident that the old town is completely in a disaster. You know, all the parts of the cities that built services only based on tourists were struggling the most. And it brought along actually a very interesting moment, also a moment of a restart in the city space as well, that you think that if there's a certain part of the city that stops offering value to its local communities and local citizens, that what's the real offering in there? And actually now, thanks it's bizarre to think that there's something happening thanks to the pandemic, but actually there's a very healthy dialogue going on in Tallinn at the moment, that how do we rethink what's going on in Old Town, which has become sort of a tourist trap of a location. And I think due to that kind of a moment of truth, that tourists have fled, what's left, we've been able to prove to the city government that, see, we need a cultural fabric to be brought back to the old town to offer something to the local community. And actually the whole thing has brought upon a very interesting snowball effect in collaboration with the Estonian tourist sector as well. By the way, do you know an interesting fact and a statistic issued by the World Tourism Organization, that 40% of world tourism is motivated by arts and culture? So it's actually our tourism sectors rely on the cultural offering, be it festivals, be it then cultural heritage or museums or exhibitions, arts, music, anything. So it's like, quite often when our governments are discussing that we need a relief package giving to the tourism industry, then we can ask the question that let's take one step further. What's the reason for people to travel? And a lot of the lobbying that has been going on in Estonia, I would say the key point for us has been to refresh the toolkit. How do we lobby? And statistics, data, and knowledge And looking inside our own industry, knowing our industry's facts and figures and statistics is the basic lobby tools that we all need to sharpen up.
Yeah.
And kind of like analyzing the economic impact. You know, the whole nighttime economic conversation has, of course, brought this knowledge into a much more wider conversation. But I think now that we know how little do our governments know of the ecosystem of music, I think it's now up to our industry to really reshape the knowledge of how do we collect statistics and how do we analyze the economic effect, not only in our own industry, but the kind of spillover effect of music and culture as a catalyst in a society for bringing above other types of kind of change or rethinking, repurposing spaces, cities, you know, the whole thing. But if we're talking about what has really brought the best effect in our case has really been the fact that the whole cultural sector in our country has been brought together. We've been joined as a lobby force, and it's the latest issue that now we've been teaming up with the tourism sector as well. There are lots of things we're working on together. Right now, the European Health Pass, for example, you know, we talk a lot about rapid testing. Enric, by the way, everybody's looking forward to the results of the Spanish research as well. We want to show it to the Estonian government as well. What does this bring about? But what we realized that a lot of the politics is about kind of opposition, I don't know, tourism against culture and vice versa. But now that we've joined forces and see that we have actually the same interest, travel pass that would allow us to travel, but also to access restaurants, culture, venues, we have a much more powerful sort of a lobby platform. So some of the things I wanted to mention.
Yeah, no, I think all really relevant and pertinent actually to what's happening. And I think that sort of that lobbying, those lobbying tools are really key, aren't they? And you're right, it has brought the sector together in lots of ways to have that lobbying capacity and push. And I think that reimagining that you said as well is really interesting, and it actually makes me think of a lot of conversations that we've been having in the UK about culture generally, about reimagining and thinking about its power and the way it can impact different sectors and different parts of our cities and lifestyles, and also, you know, you were mentioning earlier on about mental health and well-being. I think the role for that as well is clearly felt too. So it's some really interesting points. No, thank you. I'm just noticing the time actually, and we've got under 10 minutes. I think we've got 8 minutes left. So yeah, if anybody listening wants to put any questions to the panel, please do submit some questions. We'd really love to hear from you. But I just wondered, just as we're sort of like coming to the end of the panel, and I might interrupt if any questions come through. I just wondered if you could just think about your own particular hope and aspiration for the music sector for 2021 and beyond, given the pandemic situation that we're in, just to kind of wrap up, and maybe also just come up with a few concluding statements that you want to kind of add into the conversation. And I'll feed in any feedback we get from the panel as we go along. So yeah, Jesper, if you want to say a few words about that, that would be great.
Yeah, but as I said before, I mean, it has pretty clearly been obvious to people working in the industry that they need to step up the game and work together, and they need to talk about themselves in a sort of a very much higher political level than they're used to. In Denmark, we have this, as also mentioned a little bit before, we have this division between the cultural part of the music environment and the business part of the music environment. And my hope is that those two columns will grow together in a much more efficient and agile way, because that is pretty much needed. And just to follow up on Helen again, but even though it has been a challenge when we are talking about politics and understanding on the national level, I'm pretty happy that on a city level, there has been much more openness to work culture and obviously also music. Also, they created programs that where music should be performed and presented in other areas of the city, of the city's policy areas. For instance, a combination with music and healthcare, combination with music and social areas, etc. All these kind of new areas where music is actually playing a big role. And I think we will see a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I think that working together and that sort of collaboration between the business and culture sector, that's been really felt in Manchester as well, that there's that real shift in bringing those things together, and the commercial venues, the commercial clubs, the commercial initiatives, and that sort of more public sector area of development. So yeah, that's interesting, and it is about openness and adaptability, I guess, as we move forward. That's one of the strengths. Lex, do you want to add anything to that in terms of your kind of hope for?
Yes, well, I was going to say exactly the same thing, Jesper. Actually, I think that moving forward, that we have learned it took a long time to get all levels of government across this and to understand, but arts and culture is no longer just the realm of the arts and cultural ministries or departments. This must now be embedded across every single ministry and portfolio. It's essential for education, it's essential for health, it's essential for our economy, nighttime economy, for tourism, for talent attraction, for innovation, for the branding of a city. And it's incredibly important in urban planning. And urban planning is the thing that's going to really be able to unlock the potential of our city to house more entertainment, music and performance, and it's also going to protect what we have. So we need to be able to see our cultural venues as being as important and essential as, parks, sports and recreation fields, hospitals, schools, and all of those other things that we take for granted as every city must have. We need to understand that the venues and the cultural activity is just as much a part of everybody's responsibility and right.
Yeah. I mean, I think, that sort of embedding it in everything and in urban planning, and also in that sense of who we are as sort of citizens and our kind of, and just basically our kind of our own sense of self, and collectively and independently, culture plays such a major part of that. Enrique, have you got anything to add in terms of your hopes and aspirations?
Yeah, I mean, my wish is that a lot of politicians would be listening to this conversation, because I think every city, we all know from the history of Barcelona in the 92s that the city that have a strong arts and culture can attract great number and good profile of visitors, right? So thanks, Elena, for your figures over the 40%. I'm going to use it next time we have a meeting with someone that can do something. So yeah, I mean, the reality is we are supporting more than ever also the local scene. It has been at that time also to look inside the people that are producing, the artists that are performing and preparing things to happen in Barcelona. It's been very interesting. My personal hope is I really want to have very, very loud music in front of me with a lot of people enjoying it.
That's a great personal hope. We've got like 1 minute, so I don't know, Helen, whether you want to say just quickly something. We're going to be cut off any second.
Yeah, 2 keywords.
Yes.
The impact of arts and culture as a catalyst to bring about all types of change. But the second thing, collaboration with culture and scientists, and I mean behavioral sciences and neurosciences. I think there's a lot we can do to collaborate with scientists on that frame of mind. So I think that's really exciting territory.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. We've absolutely got to go now. And we haven't got any time for any questions now, but thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. And it's been such an interesting and dynamic and forward-looking conversation. So thank you. And goodbye, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the panel, and see you all soon.